Welcome to GameSpot Live. I'm Greg Kasavin here to tell you all about Xenosaga for the PlayStation 2. The name of the game might sound familiar if you've been around the block when it comes to RPGs. It sounds like Xenogears, which is a RPG from back in 1998 that was published by Square. Xenosaga is published by Namco, but the developer of the game, a company called Monolith, actually did make Xenogears before this game, and the two are share a lot of traits in common, most notably their emphasis on a very long and detailed story, and also some kind of rather unusual religious elements in what's otherwise kind of a science fiction themed story filled with giant robots and monsters and all kinds of, you know, more standard stuff that you expect to see in games. Xenosaga is just a very detailed game. It's very epic. It's long. It has interesting characters in it, and is just really much more involved than most RPGs. It's definitely not for everyone. It's a game that you have to sit and watch nearly as often as you actually play. There's never been a game in history that puts as much emphasis on story as Xenosaga does. Never one that has cutscenes so frequent and so long as this game. So that's both a warning and a recommendation for the game. It really is quite unusual. The cutscenes are all fully 3D. They're done using the game's engine, but they're scripted very well. They're dramatic and exciting oftentimes, even though they can get pretty long-winded too. And they detail, you know, what's a pretty impressive science fiction story. Playing through the game is like watching an entire, anime sci-fi miniseries or something like that. Fortunately, you can pause the cutscenes or even skip them should you ever want to replay a sequence. The main character of the game is named Shion Uzuki. She's a scientist working on basically an android designed to fight this strange, ghost-like alien menace called the Gnosis. Lots of things happen even early on in the game, and soon enough, Shion and Cosmos, this android of hers, find themselves allied with other rather interesting characters, including a cyborg named Ziggy and a young girl who is actually a kind of an artificial organism named Momo, and this young-looking kid who happens to be the captain of a huge starship named Junior. So it's an unusual cast of characters. You'll grow to like them most likely early on, and really the characters are one of the driving forces of this game. Even some of the peripheral characters you'll meet are well established and quite likable. A lot of surprising events happen, and again you see them play out in these really long cutscenes which can go for past 30 minutes at a time sometimes. The gameplay itself is pretty standard for an RPG. You kind of run around from an overhead perspective going to your next destination, occasionally fighting monsters. There are no random encounters at all in Xenosaga. It's almost as if the designers intended to fill the game with story rather than with random encounters like a lot of other RPGs have. Whenever you're in a dangerous situation, you'll always see the enemies kind of running around or patrolling on the map, and if you go within their eyesight or run into them, then you'll fight, but it's never like you're walking along and suddenly you're in a fight, so that's quite good. The combat itself is also relatively standard for an RPG. You kind of take turns slugging it out with your enemies, but it does have some twists, and it's very tactical. You could use different combos for your characters. This is a kind of a throwback to Xenogears, and you could also get into these giant robots that can really dish out serious damage, but they have a few issues that balance them out too. It's difficult to restore their health and things like that. The combat is relatively slow-paced and pretty flashy, similar to the recent Final Fantasy games, and towards the end of the game, you'll really have to take all your turns very carefully, make sure you're taking into account your enemy's weaknesses, stuff like that. So it's pretty strategic, and there's quite a bit of depth to it if you look for it. Xenosaga is a great-looking game. The characters are really expressive, and the combat looks good and everything. The sound, on the other hand, does have some issues. What music there is in the game is generally really outstanding. It's kind of sweeping orchestral type tracks that fit in really well with the game, but unfortunately there are many sequences in Xenosaga where there's just no music playing at all. During cutscenes it's all there and really adds to the drama. But during gameplay, when you're kind of running from place to place, often all you'll hear are the footsteps of your character, and it's rather a missed opportunity for kind of setting the mood and establishing the scene. And considering how good the soundtrack is, you'll just wish there were more of it that you could listen to. The voice acting is also a little bit spotty. There's a whole lot of speech in this game. All the cutscenes are in full speech. Some of the performances are really good, and others just aren't. And I feel like the script is kind of a big part of the culprit, because some of the attempts at comic relief and so forth just don't go over very well. And sometimes the dialogue devolves into kind of Star Trek-style techno-babble that doesn't really seem pertinent. But at other times, you gain a really good sense of the characters, and you'll really grow to like them over the course of the game. Xenosaga is a really unusual game. Games like this just don't come around often. It's remarkable how much effort really obviously went into this game. You could just tell a lot of people spent a lot of time putting this game together. It's really, from the heart, and has a lot of really strange stuff that happens in it. It has these little kind of religious references in it that are probably going to creep some people out, maybe even offend some people. Others are going to think it's really, really cool and daring and experimental. So if you're hardcore into RPGs or really like anime, or let alone both those things, then Xenosaga is definitely going to have a lot to offer you.